So I really wanted to come into this video with the complete clear mindset of this was the best purchase I'd made in my life. However, the slightly disappointing thing with the recent announcements from Apple is pretty much the direction of the iPad. Now don't get me wrong, this is still an absolutely fantastic device, but having invested a significant amount of money in the M4 Pro, so the iPad Pro with the M4 processor, the Magic Keyboard and the new iPad Pro pen, or the Apple Pencil Pro, I was a little bit kind of disappointed on the current direction. The biggest announcement obviously for the iPad was the addition now of the calculator app that's been available on the iPhone for probably the last 10 or so years, if not more. That being said, obviously it does have some particular perks that it can do stuff like maths notes, but you've got to look at your target audience for that. If your target audience is a maths professor or somebody who's currently studying maths, then it's absolutely useful. But for the likes of myself, where is the use case, I suppose? But anyway, I'm sure I'll find a way to utilize it. So I wanted to talk about the iPad Pro, a little bit about my experience with it, my views, whether I would purchase it again, or, you know, would I look at an alternative? Now, I'll be honest, I used to be very much an Android fan completely, so one of those type of fanboys on Android. However, I've always had a soft spot for iPads because they just generally work, right? They don't generally have many challenges, the support's usually pretty good. They do receive most of the time all the iOS updates that they're supposed to receive. I think the only annoyance I've had sometimes around them is the storage capabilities. So having had iPads in the past with only 16 gig of memory, when your iOS update is around 15 gig, you can imagine some of the challenges around that. But on the whole, generally, they've been very good devices. When they released the Apple Pencil, I thought it was a nice idea. I did kind of buy into that ecosystem. I had one of the original M1 Pro iPads with an Apple Pencil. And I had, before even the M1 series, I did have an iPad as well, so a Pro version. So again, I've always been used to the kind of Pro type features, which is nice to have. The facial recognition is brilliant, it's fantastic, it makes life so much easier for logging in. I think that's been one of the things that I always found a little bit clunky with Android devices, sometimes around the biometrics or the other kind of MFA type factors didn't always work as they should. Quite often it would lose my fingerprint when I was using an Android device, and I'd have to go through that enrollment process again. So Face ID is something definitely that works. Also having a iPhone 14 Max, I'm kind of used to that technology, and having the ability with the iPad Pros to switch between these seamlessly is just something I couldn't ignore. So I was absolutely always going to look at getting another iPad. Probably what I should have done though, and a lot of YouTubers will tell you to do this, is to look at the iPad Airs, and I probably wish I would have stuck there. Now the reason for that is not because of the M4 processor itself. The M4 processor itself, I'm just going to run the Geekbench and I'll give you the scores that I get out of them. I will show you this back later. But the Geekbench scores on this are absolutely phenomenal, to the point of they probably are unnecessary. Apple spent a lot of time working on various things with this device. One was to improve the thinness. Now, to give you an idea of the thinness, the pencil itself is actually thicker than the iPad. I could compare it to the keyboard. If I put it down by the side of the keyboard, it must be about 1 millimeter bigger than the actual keyboard itself. So from a size-wise point, this is just, yeah, it's unbelievable. Does it feel, yeah, you could bend it. I'm absolutely not going to. I haven't got that kind of money spare just to be bending one of these. But it is a significant outlay from that perspective. So Yeah, did I need the M4 Pro is probably the biggest consideration. However, I'm always someone who likes to have the best of the best, right? You need to have one of those scenarios. And yes, maybe then I should have gone for the 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte version that would have given me the additional core. But nevertheless, it's not something that I necessarily needed or wanted to throw another £200 to £300 down the drain on. So I think where I went for the 512 is probably that nice middle ground. The models they do it in is a 256, 512, 1 terabyte and 2 terabyte. And if you want the particular special screen, which with the kind of matte finish which stops the glares, then you have to go to at least the 1 terabyte or 2 terabyte versions to have that. But again, I think that's an extra £100 or $100 to or $200 to have that functionality. So this is still running the Geekbench at the moment. What I do find useful is the real estate, right? We've got a 13-inch. This is one of the largest, or is the largest iPad that they brought out. So it has a nice real estate. I think the annoying thing is still the aspect ratio. If you compare this to the likes of the Samsung S9 Ultra, which has a 16 by 10, I believe this one is running at a 3 by 2, which kind of leaves me with that challenge always with the boxed style media, particularly when I watch YouTube videos, which I do quite often. You're presented with an off grey style bezel at the top and bottom, which is a bit disappointing. It would be nicer if they were like those true blacks that would pull those in. So that's just something, if you were going to use this just as a media device, I'd probably recommend looking at the S9 Ultra instead, because one, you've got a bit more real estate, and two, you're going to get that more cinematic type experience. However, what is good about this is obviously all these bits that sit together, right? You have your Apple Pencil, which seamlessly connects. You do need to have the Pencil Pro to work with this new version. It does sit on the top now, it's no longer sitting on the side. The Magic Keyboard, the newer version, is pretty much like most Magic Keyboards. However, it does have a more premium feel to it. So it's got a titanium base, so a more rugged style taste. It's also got a full list of function type keys at the very top, so the media type keys, which you can use the controls on and swap them over. It's a bit dark in here. So that's quite useful in that respect, that it's got something along those lines. The screen itself, I don't need to say too much about the technology, but obviously it's using that tandem OLED, which is pretty astonishing in itself. The brightness of this is absolutely phenomenal. I sat outside in the 1 day of summer that we get each year in the UK the other day. I do have a south-facing garden, so I'm in one of those privileged positions where when I do get sun in my back garden, it's there and it's very intense. I did find that I could still see this. I was watching videos out in the back garden, I was watching some other YouTubers, and one of the things I did notice is it did instantly turn it into white mode, so into light mode, not into dark mode. It couldn't cope with dark mode in that that kind of brightness level. But what it did do is it cranked up my brightness to maximum, and I could still see it. Of course, if I put it into direct sunlight, you will still have challenges with reflections. That being said, though, it was still very, very viewable. It's probably been one of the better that I've ever seen. And that's no surprise, right? You've got those two tandem OLEDs, those two OLEDs layered on top of each other to enable that brightness to come through. So the scores are in for the Geekbench. A single core score of 3757 and a multi-core score of 13279. Now, to give you an idea of how that kind of compares, let me just pull that up. If you compared this to, say, the iPhone 15 Pro, the iPhone 15 Pro and Pro Max generally get a single core score of 2908 compared to the 3757. If I was going to look at comparing it to my iPhone 14, the iPhone 14 only knocks into, or the Pro Max only knocks into 2566. So that's quite an uplift, a significant uplift, over 1,000 additional points in the single core. Now, multi-core is where it absolutely blows everything out of the water. So if I compared this to the very last iPad Pro, which was the 4th generation, that scored 9622 in multi-core, where this has got 13279. So you can see the multi-core performance on this is absolutely phenomenal. And if you compare that to, say, like the iPhones, it's nearly double that. So the iPhone, well, it's definitely double what I get on my Pro Max 14. So the Pro Max 15, for example, will score around 7204. So it kind of gives you an idea of the power inside this. What lets this down, though, unfortunately, and you'll hear this a lot, is the software. Now, I don't mean that as in the software is not good, because let's be honest, I said earlier, I generally feel that iPad OS is stable, it's good, it does everything you want it to do. But let's start to think about the price range you're putting this into. When you think of the iPad being £1,200 or $1,200, the Magic Keyboard being an additional $350 or £350, and then the Apple Pencil being $120, we're getting very, very close to that £2,000. You know, we're talking $1,700 or so UK pounds, or $1,700 that we're putting down on this. Now, for $1,700, I could get a very substantial laptop. Now, that doesn't mean it would be an Apple, because if I wanted to go down a Mac, unless I went for a Mac Air and a few generations below, I would probably be throttling myself back to lower performance than this. So I suppose the question is to Apple, why? Why did they stick an M4 processor in this to leverage this much power, but then have the OS hold it back? I suppose the answer for that will come later this year. So when we see iOS 18 launch with Apple Intelligence, wonderful job they've done there at marketing. It's probably the easiest marketing campaign you'll ever run. We'll see exactly what this can do from an Apple Intelligence point on device. Because if you did watch the keynote, how they're going to work the AI that sits on side, the Apple Intelligence that sits on side these devices, is they'll say where possible the compute and calculations and the large language models and the machine learning will all be done on device where possible. If not, it will go out to Apple's private cloud where it can then process that, so if it's further on, but also have a link into OpenAI, which is obviously where ChatGPT comes in. So I suppose with the more compute and the higher neural engines in these, one of the good things will be is that potentially this device can probably do more of it on device and send less to the cloud. But until we get iOS 18 later this year, we really don't know exactly what impact it's going to have. It might be quite interesting because I imagine I will still have my 14 because I'll be waiting for the release of the iPhone 16 before I upgrade. So I suppose one of the things we'll see is exactly what has changed, right? And my hope is that they've done something significant.
So the continuity of that video would have been completely shot because I had to film that over a couple of days, mainly because of the hay fever I've been suffering. But that was my thoughts on the Apple M4 iPad Pro 13-inch. And don't get me wrong, I think as time progresses, things may change. I just am so disappointed that they haven't still bridged that gap between an iPad and the Mac OS. Having that M4 in there just seems such a waste at the moment. Now that may change, so let's watch this space. Let's see what Apple bring out. Obviously later this year we're going to get iOS 18, so I'm really looking forward to that and just see what changes then are on the horizon in future iOS updates. Anyway, if you've liked this video, it's been a very different one for me, then please hit the like and subscribe and even drop your thoughts in the comments below. And as always, I'll see you next time.